So let's give you a quick little history. We've been doing this since 2004, so we got over 20 years experience. Last year, our company repaired almost 100 balconies throughout LA County and Orange County. And we are a licensed contractor here in California, and we perform major remodels for apartment buildings and private homes, earthquake retrofitting and that type of stuff. So we've been doing this for a while, and I want to take this opportunity to share some of our knowledge with you so you can be an informed buyer of these services. So I like to start off with a four-step process for evaluating and getting the balconies compliant with the state. First, most people, when they call our offices, they have already a report done that an engineer or an architect did, and they email that over to us. So in there's some limited pictures and stuff of the balconies that were inspected and what type of work was done as far as inspection goes. Now, once the inspector finds that you have some type of damage, it really is important to open up that area and see if you have structural damage, because you have two kinds of damage. One could be just the outside surface, so the waterproofing can look discolored, things like that. You could even have some discoloration in the stucco. The more expensive damage to fix is if you have structural damage. And the structural damage really is where the city gets involved. You have to get permits, got to get engineering and that type of stuff. So before you bring out the engineers, though, you have to open up the area to see how much damage is actually there on the balcony. And that's basically the pre-construction phase. Once the area is exposed, then we have the engineer come out, they draft repair plans for you, and then I submit them, or your contractor will submit them on your behalf. You're also welcome to do it yourself if you have the time to do that. Then the third phase really is coordinating with the tenants. If you have major structural damage, you're gonna have to go into the units, and that's gonna involve either getting a rental place for the tenants or mitigating them if they're gonna stay there. So these are things that have to be planned out way before you start the construction. And then ultimately the last phase is to do the construction and the certification, at which point you're gonna be completely compliant with the city. If you have an apartment building as part of our service, we will just give you the certification letter that says, hey, the work has been done, this is the permit number, and you're compliant. And that's all you have to do, just file that away. The final inspection gets done, and you don't have to do anything else, you're compliant. So the question becomes, how much damage, and how do I know if I have damage? And I'm gonna show you what some of the signs are. Now, for some of the balconies that are very clearly, they've got damage, you'll see cracking like this. But there's also other types of signs. There'll be discoloration in the stucco, discoloration in the waterproofing, bubbling, an uneven surface. Just for your general knowledge, you should be putting a fresh coat of paint on the balconies every 5 years to protect the waterproofing systems, okay? We have actually samples of that on our booth. You can go check it out after the seminar. You can see what the waterproofing systems look like. Now, the signs that kind of scare me are when you see flaking or black mold growing through the stucco, because that means you have dry rot. You actually have fungus growing through the stucco. And you only have that fungus when you have structural damage. So that means that your balcony had cracks on it for probably 10, 15 years. You had tenants watering their plants and having a little botany experiment up on top, and the water got through, and it's been constantly soaked. So it'll cause this kind of sign. Now, the other location where water seeps in is these parapet walls. So if you see this little section right here, this is called a parapet wall. Now, if you live by the coast, I really recommend that your contractor cap it with metal to protect it, because if you just have stucco, over time, that water condensation in the morning will beat up that stucco, cause the cracks, and eventually got water. And you'll get termites. Not only will you get rot, but you'll also get termites, which is it's a bad combination. Rust is another indicator. Now, if you've had your balconies painted often, you'll probably paint over this rust and you won't see it. But when I see rust, basically that means that that flashing is gone. It has to be replaced. It'll never be waterproof again. Can you cover it with stuff and apply a Band-Aid to it? Yes. But as a whole, you should consider the fact that that system is is beyond its lifespan. It needs to be replaced. So in that scenario, you have to replace the perimeter flashing along with the waterproof system. This balcony has, well, it's two balconies. The top one shows this discoloration along the edge. And you see that very commonly in balconies that have a significant slope, right? So the water just drips over. Or if they have a crack at the top of the posts. That basically allows the water to come in and starts to rot the rim board, which is the edge board. That's a structural member. If that rots, you're gonna have to get engineering, you're gonna have to get the whole thing designed for the repair. And you have to have one continuous beam from one corner to the next. You can't have any splices. This is one in Redondo Beach that I saw maybe 2 years ago, and he had holes. He had 3 holes. They were letting the dogs use the bathroom up there. So they had one of those little fake grass pieces under there, and my foot almost went through one of the holes. So this basically, it's almost guaranteed that you're gonna have structural damage because there's so much water getting in there every day that it's gonna be a problem. By the way, if you're in an HOA and you have a shared wall between your balconies, if your neighbor is allowing the dogs to use the balcony as a bathroom, or they have a lot of plants and their balcony surface is in bad shape, if the damage seeps into the shared wall, there's structural members under that shared wall, that mean that both balconies have to be replaced. So you have to be careful with that. You got to make people aware. Most of the time, I would just say it's just neglect. Most people don't know, what's happening. The rot is a very slow, progressive type of thing happening. Sorry. All right. So why we do demo and discovery? The important part of doing demo and discovery is that you have to evaluate how much damage you have. You don't want to start doing a balcony repair and not know the extent of the damage, because if you do discover something like this one is one we're working on right now. This is a recent picture. This is a catwalk in Redondo Beach. He doesn't have balconies, but this is an elevated element and it falls under the code. And this is what we found when we opened it completely. If you look closely, the corners where they meet, there's no contact there. That's basically the 405 freeway of termites. And now luckily we did demo and discovery and we knew some of this damage was there. What we didn't know is that in some of the other members, when we removed the boards, there was damages into the cantilevered beams, but luckily the engineers anticipated that and they included it in the plans. So we didn't have to stop, have the plans redrafted and then resubmitted. This is a nightmare, especially if you're paying tenants to live in a hotel or something like that. You really need to get this right from go. So spend the money to open up the stucco and just get all the bad news up front. It'll help you with the stress level, because you're gonna make plans for your financial planning, right? Because this type of damage is, so let's say that this balcony was gonna be waterproofed on its own, it would probably be less than $10,000. This job is about $48,000 total. So it's got a tremendous amount of work. We have to go into the inside units and all that. But the point being, we found the damage back in April and we just started doing the construction because the owners needed time to plan. If you do this, if you just start demoing and you open it up and now the people can't get in and you're paying them a daily rate for their apartment, it's gonna be a problem. So, we've made a contingency plan and all that to get the people in there and stuff. So just think about that. Think about the value of having a demo and discovery and really understanding the totality of the damage. Okay, so this is what the balcony looked like as of Monday this week. We replaced that corner piece, we removed all the rotted stuff, and then the ones that were bad, you see the fresh wood where we sister board, it's called sister boarding. And I'm gonna get into it technically how we actually fix this in a minute, but this is the new stuff here. So those fresh pieces of wood basically were already engineered. We didn't know we had to replace them, but luckily we anticipated that, and they're already in the engineering plans. That's a little close up of the same spot. All right, this is a problem that you're going to come into every once in a while. This is part of the inside of the unit. That's a bathtub. That bathtub drain has been leaking for probably 15 years. So it's rotted. It's got fungus growing on it. It's all the bad news that no landlord wants to hear. So we're going to have to deal with that. And this is how we deal with that. This is an engineering design that's very common. Basically, it calls for the sistering of the floor joist. And by the way, since you're doing this, do the handrails too. Because your handrails, if they're non-compliant, this is the time you're going to get a great deal from your engineer, because he's going to engineer two things with one hit. And that's your handrail attachment points. On the right, you'll see where the stucco is broken between the wall and the deck, and that's what makes it waterproof. You must remove that flashing in order for the system to work. Do not let somebody talk you into just putting a system over the existing one and not replacing the flashing, because it's only as good as the weakest member. And if you replace everything, you'll have kind of a fresh start. You can look at it that you'll just have to do your 5-year maintenance for the next 20 years, and you're not going to have a problem. Again, this is just a kind of a dissection of how we remove all of the rotted members of the floor joist and put a sister board next to them. And this is the nailing pattern that the engineers come up with. By the way, I'm going to have a little question and answer at the end. So if you have some questions that you want answered, let me know. So this is a very common condition that we see in balconies where there's staining and stuff on the edges. I always look at underneath the balconies, because that's how we know if you've had an active leak, and I can tell how long the leak has been active. This was the engineering plans for that building in West Hollywood. We did that. We finished that at the beginning of this year. That was a long project, about 50 balconies on that one alone. And this is what happens when you don't maintain and keep the water out of the balconies. See the red is the rim board. That's one of the most important components of this. If there's one piece you don't want it to rot, it's that red rim board, because that really triggers almost always a rebuild. You can see the green ones in the middle, they're missing like a foot in some sections. This balcony, easily somebody could have fallen through, and luckily nobody did. But of all of the balconies in this building, this one had the most plants. All right, so let's talk money. Most people want to know what these things cost to repair and what's it going to take. I would say if we take an average of all of the balconies that we saw and we dealt with last year, we break them up into 3 different buckets. The first bucket is really deferred maintenance and repair, a very light repair. Maybe removing some pieces of subfloor, maybe removing the handrail and replacing it, etc. So you're starting at between 4 and 8K. For balconies that are, let's say 75 square feet to maybe 120 square feet, that require a whole new waterproof system, you're gonna have to break stucco, you're gonna have to do the handrails, and you're gonna have to put in new plywood under the balcony itself. So you're gonna be spending between 18 to 28, and that's a range. It could be less, it could be more. If you've had kind of delayed maintenance, you're gonna be looking at a full rebuild, and that's your nightmare scenario. So that's between 50 and 70K, and in some cases even more than that. It really just depends on the totality of the damage. But I really want to emphasize that all of this could be prevented with some maintenance over the course of the years. My biggest pro tip to you would be, look at your balconies every year, see if the waterproofing is intact, and have a game plan, kind of a calendar inspection schedule. If you do a yearly audit of your, like a maintenance audit of your building, make sure that your property management company includes that in their assessment. Are going to be the most money you spend that you can't get any more rent for. If you improve the unit, you make the bathrooms prettier, you make the kitchens nicer, you put AC in them, that's money that you'll recuperate. This is just keeping the building compliant. The other thing would be, in some cases in Los Angeles, you can actually cancel the balconies. So that'll save you some money if you're facing a full, replacement. So this year is supposed to be the wettest year. I don't know if it's going to be true. I'm not a meteorologist, but don't call your balcony guys when it's raining, because it's like calling a roofer when it's raining. They're never going to call you back. If you know you have a leak now, call them now. They're probably not doing anything. You know what the roofers are doing? Nothing. They're doing nothing right now because it's sunny. So if you need a roof, if you need balconies done and you know you got a problem, get it done right now when it's not raining. You'll be able to get a crew out there right away. And with that said, that's my end of my presentation. Do you have any questions? I'd love to answer any questions you have. We're also going to be in the booth, we're booth 316. And love to talk to you about it. If you have any pictures of your balcony, we can talk about it in person. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Yes. Okay. If it has no support, if it's an elevated element, right, and it is, and it doesn't have any posts, it just sticks out, it requires the report. It has posts, and it goes all the way down to the ground. Does it have waterproofing on it? Well, I'll tell you what. We'll talk about that at my booth. Just show me a picture of it, and we'll talk about it some more. Anybody else? All right, guys. Thanks very much for your time and attention. I appreciate you, and look forward to talking to you more about balcony repair. Bye. Individual. Some, it's the private.